worldwide sound. Talktainmentradio.com. We give you a reason to come. The world's greatest radio. We give you a reason to stay. Radio, the way it should be heard. You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of Talktainmentradio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
This is The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio, the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
Good morning and welcome to the best hour in radio. Yeah, to the greatest station in the nation, heard all around the world and coast to coast here in the United States. Talktainmentradio.com, the world's greatest radio, and you are in touch with the Compensatory Concept with Neely Fuller Jr. I am the co-host, Mr. Bobby, and this is radio, the way it should be heard. Now, if you would like to participate in this show, you can do so two ways. You can call 1-877-932-9766, and we'll get you up there, or you can email me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. And I will do my best to vet it and get you on. And if I don't get you on this week, Lord willing, we'll get you on the following week. But here he is live from Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States, Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
And as we usually say, how are you doing today?
I'm still learning.
You're still learning. What have you learned in the past since we last spoke, Mr. Fuller?
Well, I'm still looking at the same situation because basically, fundamentally, nothing has changed because we are still in the system of government, which I say is the system of racism that still exists as the dominant government on the planet. So therefore, that government should be replaced, and everyone, white and non-white, should be thinking about replacing that system of government with a better system of government. Presumably, what would be a better system of government other than a government of racism, which is what we have. That's the only government that you actually have on the planet, in the form of what we loosely call white supremacy. So you would replace it with a system of justice, since the government of racism is a system of non-justice. Yes. So the antidote for non-justice is justice. So justice would mean what? It would mean, logically speaking, I came up with a compensatory definition. There's no legal definition for the word justice. And that is guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help.
Yes. Okay, well, with that in mind, and with the last words of the Pledge of Allegiance, last few words, which it says in liberty and justice for all, and I personally do not believe that anymore. I had to regurgitate that all the way through school and so forth. With all that in mind, recently we've seen, or I have seen and read and little researched in the news about people of color being mistreated, hung up on trees still, police departments just all out, going out, and it looks like they are attacking non-white people, us. I was in a conversation with a few people, and that subject came up along with where is the Ku Klux Klan? And an interesting concept was given to me by Dr. Dixon, indicating that she felt strongly that the Ku Klux Klan has merged with the police departments all across the United States. They haven't went away. They have merged with them by the actions that she said that you could tell by the actions that they do, the codes that they have within the system, sort of hidden. And I thought about that for a little while, and I said, you know what, I'm going to ask Mr. Fuller, what did he think about that particular concept, being that he may have heard this for the first time?
Well, yes, I've heard this down through the years.
Oh, okay.
And so, but actually it's not really the police department per se. What is a police department? It's just an extension of the general society. So if you have a racist system, it means that you have racists throughout the entire system, not just under the area of activity that we call law, which I have in the textbook for victims of racism, the fifth area of activity. But in all areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, religion, sex, and war. That takes in just about everything that people are engaged in at any given moment in any society. Everything from education right up to war. I mean, what makes people angry about things and where they go and start killing each other, fighting each other in order to settle their differences and whatnot. So just law is just one area. Mm-hmm. So if there's law enforcement, naturally that would automatically reflect the thinking of the general society. It's not just the so-called police. And in fact, the actual term for police, and I try to put it in my word guide, people should never say that there's such a thing as police brutality, because now you got confusion in the language. And then they will say, well, yeah, it's not really all the police, it's just the rogue ones. And then you get into a debate back and forth about that. So I say you separate the language in the beginning so you get clarity and focus. So we should say, this is my recommendation, because everything that I try to do in compensatory logic is talk about solutions rather than just keep going over the problem over and over and over again, whatever the problem is. At some point, what is the solution? So you start with the language. You start separating police officers from race soldiers. Now, that's a term that I made up, because that's what they are. The person who is carrying a badge and a gun is a race soldier. That is not a police officer. So we should stop saying police officers are brutal, because then 15 minutes later, the same person who said that is on the phone calling 911. Get the police over here. Someone is breaking in my house. So we should change the language first. Say we should get rid of the race soldiers that are on these law enforcement entities and have police officers. We want police officers. Support the police officers. Not keep using the term that is, I've heard like forever, police brutality. Let's start using language saying it's impossible for a police officer to be brutal. It's absolutely impossible. That's a false charge. If you charge a police officer with being brutal, you're charging the incorrect person, because it's impossible for a police officer to be brutal. But a race soldier, someone who is suspected of being a race soldier, should be brought to trial and tried as a criminal, because that's exactly what he or she is. If he or she is breaking the law by doing what? Mistreating someone. Once you mistreat someone, you are not a police officer. You have identified yourself as a race soldier suspect and brought to trial as such. That's how the language should sound.
Yes, sir.
And it has nothing to do with the people who are performing police duties. Those are two separate things. You have an infiltrator here. See, rather than give them slang language like rogue cops, I mean, that's sloppy. Let's get some official terms here.
Okay.
Because actual people who are trying to do real policing, they know who those race soldiers are because they work with them. And they say, hey, we have some people here who are imposters, and we're not going to be riding around with them, you know, and we're not going to support them either, because now we'll all get blamed for something that this race soldier who has come among us is doing. And you can always tell who he is or who she is by what they actually do every day. The way they talk when they're in the squad cars and all like that. The jokes that they make and all like that. And then the other person is supposed to say, wait a minute, you know, how'd you get out of the police academy talking like that? And they got you working with me? What's going on here? I mean, is somebody setting me up? You know, these are things that officers themselves can ask. Said, hey, man, you got to stop talking like that. And you got to stop thinking like that if you're going to ride with me. Because if you think like that, you're going to get me in trouble.
Okay, race soldiers. That's what we're going to call it here. Okay, let's see here. Whoops, I lost my question. Listen, 1-877-932-9766 is the number that you can call to get in contact with the show, and Mr. Fuller will be happy to answer your questions. Or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. Okay, we have a question. Let's see here. It says, in Mr. Fuller's book, he says so-called non-white people should stop name-calling each other. I totally agree with this, and I also agree that we should not respond to name-calling when it is directed to us in a way meant to humiliate or demean us. So-called white supremacists have used name-calling as a tactic to humiliate black men and women for too long. Do you believe it is prudent for us not to respond or identify with the white supremacists and their name-calling of us, namely calling us boy and gal when we know we are fully grown men and women? I realize that so-called white supremacists exert physical control over many aspects, but that does not mean we as a people should surrender our humanity or our self-concept of being a man and a woman to them in any way. Black people did not just appear on the planet. We were here genetically long before the so-called supremacists.
Well,
it's come from Clarence Johnson. Okay.
Okay. See, we need procedures for everything. That's why I say everything should be codified. What do I mean by codified? So it means you say and do always, without exception, those things that will have the most constructive result. That should be an absolute. That should be a mathematical certainty that you always say and do what will produce the most constructive result. And that will include when someone calls your name. Now, it's time to do something or say something. Now, out of all the millions of things that you can say and do, codification means out of 10 million things that you can say or do, you pick the best of that 10 million. That's the whole key of what I call counter-racist science. You always say and do the best possible thing. So, just, know what the best possible thing is until you try it on for size. So you try a number of things. The suggestion I have said is when somebody calls your name, you have a name that you have been given or one that you have accepted, and they call you any other name other than that, regardless of who the somebody is, you go into the question mode, because all problems everywhere in the universe are solved through the process of questions and answers. That's without exception. Every problem that's ever been solved in the universe has started with a question that produced an answer, that probably produced another question, that produced another answer, and produced another question, that produced another answer, until you finally got the what? Final answer, the best answer that you can get out of all the millions of answers that could be given. So you say what? You ask a person, if a person calls you a name, calls me a boy, okay? I say, okay, sir, ma'am, and always be polite. What do you mean by singling me out as a boy? You know, and you refer to the other persons around here as men. Why did you single me out to call me a boy? That's just a question. And another thing, in counter-racist science, don't help the person with the answer. Don't start interjecting your opinion about what his opinion should be. You are asking a question. Let the person that you're addressing the question to, answer the question. Don't jump into it when they're trying to answer. And certainly don't make accusations. Certainly don't say, oh, you're trying to look down on me, or you're trying to humiliate me. That's an accusation. You want an explanation. You're not looking for position to make an accusation. Let the person tell you what they are doing. Always take a position, I don't really know what you're doing. So you tell me what you're doing. You tell me what your intentions are. Then I will know how to interact with you and how to tell everybody else how to interact with you or make suggestions about how to do that. So go ahead and let them say, okay, well, I call you a boy, and I call these other people standing around here men, and let them go on and tell you and record what they say. Because it might happen on the job, and just get in the habit of rather than make a rebuttal or anything like that, you don't say anything, you just record what is being said. Say, oh, do you stand by what you just said? See, that's another question. And the person says, oh, yes, I call you a boy, but I address everybody else around here as Mr. and Mrs. and all like that, and you know, and if you happen to recognize that you're only boy or the only girl, and they're talking about everybody else as being who is white, as being Mr. and Mrs., all you want to do is just write that down and say, now, you said this, and so I asked you a question. You gave me your answer, which is what I wanted when I asked the question. And so I'll just say, well, this is your position, so your position should be duly recorded. And so we'll go on to what else you got in your bag, you know, later on, as we work here together as quote unquote equals. You know.
Okay. All right, Mr. Clarence Johnson, I hope that that answers your question. From coast to coast and all around the world, we're heard here on TalkTainmentRadio.com. This is The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. And if you'd like to participate, you can by calling 1-877-932-9766. We will try to get you on. Or you can email me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com, and I will vet it, and if I have the opportunity to, I will get to it and read it over the air. And if you do not want your name called, as some do write in and say, then do that. But I have to check it out, because sometimes people aren't who they say they are, so we have to be very, very careful. Let's go to the phone lines. Line number 1. What is your question for Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr.?
Hello, how are you?
We are good.
Great. My name is Carla Mofora. I'm calling from Miami, Florida. And I wanted to discuss this concept of defining Europeans as being smart. I feel uncomfortable when I hear the term smart used to define them, knowing that a lot of the information that they've gained over this historical context has been from Africans traditionally, as well as we continue to support their intel and their development as a nation by them being able to go back and still research our traditional way of life, our civilization, as well as our sciences and medicines as well. So when we use terminology and definitions to define them as smart, do you think smart is the best description for that. I think it's kind of cunning, or maybe like, there's just a different feeling to me that's attached to the term smart. And I think that it leads into this self-fulfilling prophecy of our inferiority complex as Africans when we hear the term smart used to describe Europeans.
Mm-hmm.
And, it just detaches us from our own intelligence as a historical, race. So how do you feel about that terminology being used, and what's the best definition for what it is that they've used against us in an intelligent way?
Okay. Mr. Fuller?
I didn't quite get that question.
Okay, caller, could you kind of simplify it so he can answer it there about what Europeans have done?
Yeah, as far as, the stealing of information, the sciences and the things that they've mastered to build their economy now.
Mm-hmm.
In current day contemporary times, they're still studying our sciences and our medicines and able to capitalize off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And people define this expertise that Europeans have as being smart, or, they're more intelligent, or they're smarter.
Okay.
Which leads to an inferiority complex amongst Africans.
Okay.
It's nationwide that we're not as smart as them. I think that that's a detachment from our sciences.
All right, Mr. Fuller?
Is she saying something about people saying that people of African descent are not smart? I'm not clear on what she's saying.
As best as I can tell, the Eurocentricity, or people who support that, seem to think that they are smarter when a lot of the experiments and things that have been done by Africans, and they have taken credit for it. But it looks as if they are the ones that have been referred to as being smart, and we are the ones that are considered less smart, which may tend to have us suffer from an inferiority complex.
Oh, sure. That goes with the territory. But then it has turned out and been proven, and all the evidence shows it now, that when it comes to being smart, and it depends on what you're smart in. See, everybody's smart in something. There's an old proverb that says, he who does not know one thing knows another. So every person on the planet knows something that somebody else doesn't know. That's each and every person. See, I always say follow the logic. Every person, even in a family. I mean, you'll have one person who knows something that the other person doesn't know. People always communicate with each other, or they do, generally speaking, and each person learns something from another person. What the white supremacists have done, they have consolidated their knowledge, and they also hoard knowledge. So I say, and the evidence shows it, that compared to the non-white people of the planet, those white people, not all white people, but those white people who have chosen to be white supremacists, have consolidated enough knowledge to be white supremacists. And therefore, they have become the smartest people in the world.
Go ahead, caller. You wanted to finish your...
Well, I thank you for that, and I agree. But I guess when using definition and terminology, it just feels an uncomfortable feeling to hear that they are still considered smarter, knowing that although they consolidated and hoarded information that was stolen, I don't see that as being smart. Smart to me means it's like, ingenious, like it's coming from the actual intel of the person who's creating the information. So I don't see them as being actually smart. I see them as being maybe clever or cunning to a certain degree, but just the terminology itself implies something that I think we disconnect our historical background from. They're still studying our sciences to gain knowledge, so I don't see them as being smart. I see them as being students, to a certain degree. But I don't know if you understand what I'm saying about the terminology and the way it's used.
Okay, wait a
minute.
I'll get Mr. Fuller to respond to that. You want to
respond? Yes, I've had these discussions ad infinitum with many people. Now, I put it in the textbook for victims of white supremacy. Being smart does not mean good. We often think about a person who is smart as being good. There is such a thing as a person being smart who has ulterior motives. But the person is smart enough to pull off those ulterior motives towards someone who is unsuspecting of their ulterior motives, their incorrect motives. A person who is able to conquer you, enslave you, and make you do their bidding is at that time. And we have to accept that fact. And it's really not an embarrassment. It just means that you've been outwitted. We have all been outwitted. We have all been outwitted by someone who sought to be smarter than the people that they were going to conquer and enslave. That is self-evident, but it's not an embarrassment. Black people get embarrassed because we wound up being slaves. That's not reason for embarrassment. That's just reason to get smarter than the people who enslaved you. That's all that is. We don't understand that concept. We're so busy thinking about how we feel about things rather than doing what is necessary, because it's all mathematical. A person who's hiding behind the bush and getting ready to rob you is smarter than you if they are able to jump out behind the bush and rob you and make off with your weekly paycheck. That person has outsmarted you. That's the truth of the matter. Now, you can say that, no, the person's not smart. The person is just evil. You shouldn't mix the two. The person was smart enough to get your check. Now, you have got to become smart enough that next time you come down that sidewalk, you say, I know that person is hiding behind that bush, because they do this all the time when I get my check. So I am going to come with somebody and send them behind that bush before I get down that street, because I know that's where that person is. Mm-hmm. Now you have gotten smart enough to outwit the person who is robbing you. That's all it is. It's a mechanical thing. It's not an emotional thing. Non-white people always just cringe and say, it makes me feel bad for somebody to be smarter than me. Everybody is smarter than you at some time or another, particularly when you're born in the world. And I say this to the whole non-white world. Stop being embarrassed about what you don't know. Nobody comes into the world knowing anything. You come into the world and you learn things from people who are already here, for the most part. That's the procedure.
That's the procedure.
Yes.
Okay, caller. Thank you so much for your call, and we appreciate that. Mr. Fuller from Daryl Reeves, he said, first of all, I can't thank Mr. Fuller enough for his work. It has definitely helped me to put things in perspective when dealing with the system of white supremacy. On to my question. Sigmund Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays, used Freud's research into the human subconscious in order to figure out how the human mind works and how to manipulate people into buying things on that basis. Freud said that the human subconscious is ruled by four things: sex, aggression, safety, and self-preservation. Using this knowledge and subsequent propaganda techniques help corporations and government to become ultra-rich throughout the 20th century. Many people consider this method of manipulation propaganda to be evil and wrong. My question is, do you think it is constructive for blacks to use these same techniques within legal boundaries for financial gain? Tell you what, we'll get to that question after we do our station break. TalkTainmentRadio.com. You can check us out on WCRS FM 98.3 Wednesday and Sunday evenings. Blogs and podcasts are available. Download TalkTainmentRadio.com app to your cell or tablet. We go where you go, and that is radio the way it should be heard. All right, stay tuned. We have this question that we're going to ask Mr. Fuller, and then your phone calls, all coming up next on the world's greatest radio, TalkTainmentRadio.com.
TalkTainmentRadio.com is the premier internet radio platform offering 40-plus talk radio-style programs professionally produced, optimized for online distribution, featuring Columbus, Ohio on-air personalities. TalkTainmentRadio.com offers listeners diverse programming options covering topics such as arts and culture, love, life and relationships, technology, religion, paranormal activities, local and national politics, women's issues, alongside health and wellness. Listeners can access their favorite TalkTainmentRadio.com programs free of cost through the website. Download the TTR app to your cell phone and you can take us wherever you go. We have programs on demand to fit your schedule through our podcast. The address is TalkTainmentRadio.com.
Do you own property? Are you considering a seller financing option? Do you know the latest laws and regulations impacting seller financing? The National Real Estate Investors Association is working on these issues and has information available for those considering this option at nationalreia.com. That's www.nationalreia.com.
We can give you a new heart.
We can help you walk again.
We can perform brain surgery.
We can treat a sore throat.
We can bring life into the world.
We can work so many miracles. But the one thing we cannot do is read your mind.
When you communicate with your doctor,
When you ask us more questions,
you reduce your risk of suffering a medical mistake.
tens of thousands of lives are lost every year due to medical mistakes.
The healthcare community is working on it, but you can help.
Please, open up. Ask more questions.
What are the side effects?
When should I expect my test results?
Will this medication interact with my other prescriptions?
We can't answer if you don't ask.
Help reduce your risk.
Questions are the answer.
Learn the 10 questions you must ask. Visit www.ahrq.gov. This message brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, and the Ad Council.
In the small town of Elmira, New York, a boy was born into an all-American family. The odds of him opening his own clothing store at the age of 18? 1 in 138,000. Excited to be a part of pop culture, he packed for the big city. The odds of him achieving his dream in the fashion industry? 1 in 23 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 68. I am Tommy Hilfiger, and my family is affected by autism. I encourage you to learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs. Early diagnosis can make a lifetime of difference.
Brought to you by Autism Speaks, the Ad Council, and TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio.
Supporting minority education. I'm Sean Booker, dammit, from The Melting Pot. I'm here to tell you that as the mother of a high school senior, I know due to financial circumstances, many of America's deserving minority students do not have access to a college education. Since 1944, the United Negro College Fund has sought to provide one. Since 1972, the beginning of this campaign, UNCF has helped more than 300,000 talented students earn a college degree. I'm Sean Booker, dammit. Give a helping hand.
The United Independent Compensatory Code System concept by Neely Fuller is considered as one of the substantial and basic books for understanding and effectively countering racism. Neely Fuller will turn upside down everything you've heard and everything you think you know about racism and how it works. Call area code 202-484-5461. 202-484-5461.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
Go ahead. Make my day.
You got the power.
All right, the best hour in radio from coast to coast and heard all around the world. TalkTainmentRadio.com, the greatest radio. That's radio the way it should be heard. You're listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. I'm your co-host, Bobby, Mr. Bobby, and you can get in touch with us by calling 1-877-932-9228. 9766, or you can Gmail me at 7mrbobby@gmail.com. And after I vet your questions, I will try to get it on in the remaining moments that we do have. And speaking about what we do have, listen, if you don't have it, you need to get this and not just squawk off in the mouth. You need to get the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a workbook, textbook for thought, speech, and or actions for victims of white supremacy. You need to get this book by Neely Fuller Jr. And I went to the site again to check it out. And in my opinion, they have, Mr. Fuller and his staff have put together a safe way to get the book, and you can track it to your home. They put it in there, and it doesn't take long for it to arrive. And it's well worth your read to arm yourself with knowledge. You want to add to that, Mr. Fuller?
Yes, you can get it by going to producejustice.com. And what will come up on the screen is a brief description of a basic textbook, and then recently, 2010, there was an addition to the basic textbook called a Counter-Racist Codified Word Guide. Now, it's not a dictionary, but it's similar to a dictionary, but it tells you what words to use, what words not to use, what words to ask questions about when other people use the words. Because, like I said before, all problems are solved through the process of questions and answers. So when people use certain words, words are tools, really. So if a tool sounds strange to you or looks strange to you, like looking in a toolbox and you see a strange tool, you ask questions. What does this tool do? Words are the same way. Words are nothing but tools of communication. And the white supremacists have become masters of words. So you have to be aware of that. They're very tricky with the use of words.
Mm-hmm.
They can pronounce you guilty when you're not guilty. And they can show all kinds of quote, unquote, evidence through the use of words that you are guilty. And they can make it sound so by the use of words and trick language. They can make you think that you're guilty when you're not, because you have bought into the language that they are using, and you're not asking questions. You're not saying, wait a minute, what do you mean when you say this? What do you mean when you say that? See, because all problems are solved through the process of questions and answers.
And answers, yes, sir. Okay. Let's get back to the question here. And when he wanted you to answer this, Freud said that the human subconscious is ruled by four things: sex, aggression, safety, and self-preservation. Using this knowledge and subsequent propaganda techniques have helped corporations and government to become ultra-rich throughout the 20th century. Many people consider this method of manipulation propaganda to be evil and wrong. My question is, do you think it is constructive for blacks to use these same techniques within the legal boundaries for financial gain? This comes from Daryl Reeves.
Well, here again, everything is either going to be constructive or non-constructive. There's nothing in between. Every move that a person makes, everything that a person says all day, people, when they're just talking to each other on the bus, and finally they depart, and they have been talking for about 15 minutes on that 15-minute bus ride, what was said during that time is either going to have a constructive effect or a non-constructive effect. It's real simple. It's not complicated at all. And this is all in this program that people have to remember each and every moment of each and every day. Every move that everybody makes is going to have a constructive effect or a non-constructive effect. And you can always tell by something is either constructive or non-constructive. It's either going to harm or it's going to help. The two H's, harm or help. Harm or help. Help or harm. And that's in anything that anybody says and anything that anybody does. And that's all you really have to remember. So it doesn't make any difference how people start off. Just remember those fundamentals. Now, is this going to harm somebody? Or is it going to help somebody? And if so, who is it going to harm? Now we got a question, another question. That's going to lead to another question. It's going to lead to another question. But all of those questions have answers. And you want to always get to the best possible answer, the truthful answer.
Yes, sir.
Harm or help. This is every move that people make all day long. Harm or help. Help or harm is going to be one of those categories.
Okay. You're listening to The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., heard exclusively on TalkTameItRadio.com. That's radio, the way it should be heard. Was that okay, Galen? Okay, even though it was before time. Let's go to the phone lines. Line number 2. What is your question for Mr. Neely Fuller Jr.?
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say good morning to you, Mr. Bobby, and to Dr. Fuller.
Good morning.
And I would like to ask Dr. Fuller, I'm trying to draw a comparison analysis. When I was working at Western Electric 50 years ago, when I was 17, a white man called me over and said, he said, Stan, you're a very inquisitive fellow. He said, well, let me tell you something. He said, the more you learn, the lonelier you're going to get. So when I'm dealing with this constructive aspect that Dr. Fuller has been talking about, I've been using that. And when I encounter a non-constructive person, I mean severely non-constructive, then I'm seeing myself parting company with that person. Is that the same thing that the guy was trying to tell me back then, or is that a good thing or a bad thing, or what?
Well, you're really not parting company. You just made a judgment that you are not getting anything constructive results from being around a person. That might be the reason. Or you were getting constructive results, and maybe you want non-constructive results. You just ask yourself that question. When I'm around this person and we're exchanging views, and the views that we exchange, is the result constructive or is it non-constructive? And you're correct. In a world that's dominated by people who believe in mistreating people, that's the white supremacists, racist man and racist woman, many, many things are non-constructive because that's what they do. They make people non-constructive. Black people have been turned into, people who are very, very non-constructive.
I'm very familiar with that, sir.
Yes, and so this is the result of a non-constructive intent called white supremacy, which is designed to do what? Mistreat people. Mistreat people for what reason? For fun, for glory, and for material gain. Those three things is what the white supremacist system produces, and it does it very efficiently. Sure. So that road, talking about loneliness, that goes with the territory. In fact, I made a list of...
Yeah, okay.
Yes, I made a list of people who, you might call them individualistic, and this is what my book is actually trying to make black people even more so. Individuals who think for themselves, all right, and who always think along the lines of constructive, non-constructive. Think of anything that you are doing in any given day, at any given moment, and ask yourself. See, but everything starts with yourself. Ask yourself, now this thing that I'm doing, is it producing a constructive result? This food that I'm eating, is it producing a constructive result or non-constructive result? Am I eating too much? Am I eating the correct type of food according to everything that I've learned, everything I've tried to learn? Because that food that you're eating in that restaurant right now is going to have an effect that's constructive or non-constructive. If you're getting on the bus, you ask yourself, where am I going? Now, if you're going to engage and meet someone who's going to, give you some cocaine, you ask yourself, this trip that I'm making on this bus to meet up with my buddy, is it going to have a constructive result or non-constructive result, because it's going to be one or the other. Mm-hmm. Like I've said over and over again.
Right.
Every move that you make is either constructive or non-constructive.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you got to remember.
Yes, sir. Did you have another question, Brother Stan?
Well, I just wanted to just mention that, I learned that Dr. Ben Yekinen died, and it practically went unnoticed, and that kind of hurt because the man put in so much work to help us understand stuff. And I mentioned it on Facebook, and I got absolutely no response. I was just totally saddened by that.
Well, I don't know what Mr. Fuller's response is, but I do remember this old proverb, and since you put it on the Facebook, it says, if you want to keep something from a black person, put it between the pages of a book.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah. All right, well, hey, thank you for your call. We appreciate it, man.
Thank you all for your time.
Keep on listening. Okay. All righty. Mr. Fuller, let's see. I guess it's a question or a statement from Greg Minor, and I tried to vet this as much as I possibly can, but he says, Mr. Bobby, please ask Mr. Fuller if he is aware of a Mr. Tariq Nasheed, now I don't know who that is, using his code system and some of his terminology, i.e., the religion of white supremacy, as a title for his films and promoting it as if it were his own. With what seems to be no real intention of working to end white supremacy, but only profit from the controversy surrounding that fact. Not sure if he has reached out to you, although he does admit to respecting your works. I just hate to see people stealing, especially ideas and intellectual property. Very respective, Greg Major. Now, I don't know if Greg Major is a true person. I don't know if this actually existed to get out this, whatever this film is, but what do you think about that?
Well, that's an accusation that I can't respond to because I'm not familiar with any of that. I'm not familiar with the gentleman that he's talking about. I've heard the name, and I understand he produces products that have to do with film or videos or something, and no one by that name has contacted me, but I'll just go to the code on that and just say there's, and in the word guide it says everybody should stand by his or her work. Now, I often quote people. I quote Mark Twain, I quote Adolf Hitler, I quote Winston Churchill, Frederick Douglass. I always say where I'm quoting, whom I'm quoting, and I quote myself. When I'm quoting myself, I say, this is what I'm saying, okay? If I'm quoting Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, I'll say, this is what Dr. Frances Cress Welsing has told me, or that I read it somewhere that she has written. If I'm quoting Frederick Douglass, I say that I'm quoting Frederick Douglass. Now, this is very essential in counter-racist codification. Reason being, everybody should know where the source of their material is coming from, if they know it, and not what you call give credit, just state it as a fact, because it is a fact. Because the one thing you have to have in counter-racist science is truth. Because if you don't have truth, you have something else. Mm-hmm. And what is that something else? It's very deadly, particularly among non-white people. And that is you have confusion about who is saying what and under what circumstances. So be very wary of people who are anonymous, too. See, sometimes there are people who you know, they say things that I have said and whatnot, and then they go under anonymous banner. No, that is confusion. Mm-hmm. You're actually spreading the things that the white supremacists, because the white supremacists know how to use confusion. Mm-hmm. They will sit back and watch all of these people doing this and that, watch Neely Fuller and watch him see what he's doing, and then they are very scientific. They know how to interject themselves right into all of that confusion so that everybody will wind up not knowing who's saying what.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, that's very important.
Yes, this is why I have to be careful about what I allow to come through the show, because I don't know these people. I have to vet it, and I don't want to be advertising somebody who's not real or a product that's not real. So yes, I agree with you. Before we go to the phone lines, this is Luke from Cambridge, England. He says, my question to Mr. Fuller goes as follows. Do you think it's correct for white celebrities, i.e. Steven Spielberg, Angela Jolie, Madonna, etc., to adopt non-white children under the system of racism, white supremacy? And if not, should they just leave the children in the poor countries they come from with a lack of decent food, if they have any at all, and good education, etc.? Please ask this question, sir, and if you have a moment, I look forward to hearing from you. What do you think about that?
Questions and answers. The white people that go around the world gathering up non-white people and saying, I adopt you, go into the question mode. If I ever talk to any of them, I would say, sir, ma'am, why are you adopting, quote, unquote, whatever that means, these particular people and putting them under your tutelage in order to ultimately do what? In other words, what is your ultimate purpose? Not the surface purpose, not what you say initially, well, you're trying to help them because they're starving and whatnot. You could feed them without what you call so-called adopting them. You could just adopt them in order to be fed and given educational opportunities and all like that. But by making them, quote, unquote, members of the family, what is your ultimate purpose? Do you want to teach them something about what you want them to do when it comes to other non-white people? What is the ultimate purpose of this adopting? Sometimes couples, white couples, there's a lot of that going on, who say that they are, two white females who say that they are married to each other, and they go around and adopt a lot of people of color and say, we are going to raise them to be what? These are questions. See, we got dozens of questions to ask about this raising. Oh, we are doing this and we are doing, well, we have dozens and dozens of questions that should be asked and answered truthfully about what you are going to raise them to do. See, it always comes down to the doing part. 20 years from now, what are they going to be doing? And all along the route, what are they going to be doing as you so-called raise them in this setting that you have set up? Questions.
Okay. All righty. Hope that answered that question. Okay, let's go to the phone lines. You are on with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. Go ahead, line number one.
Good morning to you and Mr. Fuller and our family. We always enjoy your show. I want to, as you know, racism is systematic and pervasive. It's alive and well. And the question I want to ask quickly is, do we need conversation on human identity beginning in the preschool through, I would say, through adulthood? Do we need conversation on human identity? And secondly, could Dr. Philly briefly